In the heart of the savannah, where survival is a daily battle, unlikely alliances can emerge from the most extraordinary circumstances. What happens when an elephant, one of the jungle's gentle giants, steps in to protect a vulnerable lion cub from imminent danger? This incredible story of compassion, bravery, and nature's unexpected twists will leave you speechless. Stay tuned as we unravel this gripping tale of survival and friendship in the wild. It was a typical scorching day in the heart of the African savanna, where life thrived and danger lurked in equal measure. The golden grass stretched endlessly under the blazing sun, swaying gently in the breeze that carried with it the scent of dry earth and distant water holes. Herds of zebras grazed peacefully in the distance, their black and white stripes rippling like mirages in the heat. Giraffes stood tall, munching on the tender leaves of acacia trees, and a pride of lions lounged lazily under the shade of a massive baobab. It seemed like any other day in the untamed wilderness. But not far from this tranquil scene, chaos was brewing. A small lion cub, no more than a few months old, had wandered too far from its pride. Perhaps it had been chasing a fluttering butterfly or had become distracted by a scuttling beetle. Whatever the reason, the cub now found itself alone, vulnerable, and very much aware of its predicament. It let out a series of high-pitched cries, each one more desperate than the last. The sound echoed across the plains, a plea for help that was both pitiful and piercing. The cub's cries did not go unnoticed. In the tall grass, a group of hyenas lurked, their ears twitching at the sound of potential prey. There were 3 of them, their mottled coats blending seamlessly with the dry vegetation. They moved with a sinister grace, their cunning eyes fixed on the cub. The leader of the pack, a particularly large and scarred hyena, licked its chops, its sharp teeth glinting in the sunlight. For a moment, the savannah seemed to hold its breath. Even the birds grew quiet as the predators closed in. The cub tried to hide, crouching low in the grass, but its trembling body betrayed its fear. Its bright amber eyes darted around, searching for any sign of its mother or siblings. There was none. The cub was utterly alone, and the hyenas knew it. They began to circle, their laughter-like calls sending chills down the cub's spine. This was a game to them, a cruel dance of intimidation before the inevitable strike. The cub let out another cry, louder and more frantic. It was a sound of pure desperation, a last-ditch effort to summon help from anyone or anything that might be near. And that cry, that single, heart-wrenching plea, reached an unexpected ear. Not far away, an elephant stood beneath the shade of a towering baobab tree, lazily flapping its ears to ward off the heat. It was an old bull, its tusks long and slightly worn from years of foraging and defending its herd. Its massive body was covered in patches of dust and mud, a natural sunscreen against the relentless sun. The elephant had been enjoying a rare moment of peace, sipping from a shallow water hole and watching the world go by. But the sound of the cub's cries shattered that peace. The elephant froze, its large ears swiveling to pinpoint the source of the noise. It recognized the sound of distress, a universal call that transcended species. The cries were faint but unmistakable, carrying with them a sense of urgency that the elephant could not ignore. It raised its trunk, sniffing the air for danger, and its keen senses picked up the unmistakable scent of hyenas. At first, the elephant hesitated. This was not its fight. It was not unusual for predators to hunt in the savannah. It was simply the circle of life. Yet, something about the cries struck a chord deep within the elephant's ancient heart. Perhaps it was the helplessness in the cub's voice, or the faint echoes of memories long buried, memories of its own offspring, lost to the merciless grip of the wild. Whatever the reason, the elephant felt compelled to act. With a low rumble that reverberated through the ground, the elephant began to move. It stepped out of the shade, its massive frame casting a long shadow over the grasslands. Each step was deliberate, the weight of its resolve evident in the earth-shaking tremors it left behind. The hyenas, still preoccupied with their game, failed to notice the approaching giant until it was almost upon them. The elephant's sudden arrival was like a thunderstorm breaking over a calm horizon. The hyenas turned to face the intruder, their mocking laughter dying in their throats as they beheld the sheer size and power of the beast before them. The elephant's ears flared wide, and it let out a deafening trumpet, a sound so loud and commanding that it sent a flock of birds scattering into the sky. The hyenas hesitated, their predatory confidence wavering in the face of this unexpected challenger. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The cub, sensing the shift in power, peered out from its hiding spot, its tiny body trembling with a mix of fear and hope. The elephant stood tall, its tusks gleaming and its trunk raised high, ready to strike if necessary. It was a protector, a guardian, and for the first time since its ordeal began, the cub felt a glimmer of safety. The standoff lasted only seconds, but it felt like an eternity. The hyenas, realizing they were no match for the elephant, began to retreat, their tails tucked between their legs. One by one, they slinked back into the tall grass, casting wary glances over their shoulders. The leader was the last to go, its pride wounded as it let out a final, defiant growl before disappearing into the distance. With the danger gone, the elephant turned its attention to the cub. It approached slowly, its movements careful and deliberate, as if to reassure the frightened creature. The cub crouched low, its wide eyes fixed on the elephant. For a moment, neither moved, and the savanna was silent once more. Then, with a soft rumble, the elephant extended its trunk, gently nudging the cub. The cub blinked, its fear slowly giving way to curiosity. It let out a tentative mew, a sound so small and fragile that it seemed almost out of place in the vastness of the savanna. The elephant responded with another low rumble, a sound of comfort and reassurance. It was a moment of connection, a bond forged in the heat of danger and the light of compassion. And so, the elephant, the gentle giant of the savanna, became the unlikely guardian of a tiny lion cub. But this was only the beginning of their extraordinary journey, a journey that would test their courage, trust, and the very limits of nature's boundaries. The savanna began to exhale its tension as the hyenas vanished into the tall grass, but the drama was far from over. The elephant, a behemoth of towering strength and grace, stood still for a moment, its large frame casting a protective shadow over the trembling lion cub. It was as if the savanna itself paused to take in this extraordinary sight. Two creatures, so different in size and nature, brought together by an act of pure instinct and unexpected compassion. The cub, barely more than a pawful of fur, was still frozen with fear. Its small, spotted body lay curled tightly against the ground, its head turned upward as its wide amber eyes locked onto the elephant. The giant's presence was both terrifying and strangely comforting. The cub didn't move, unsure of what this immense creature would do next. But the elephant, guided by an inexplicable sense of purpose, acted with a gentle care that belied its massive form. It lowered its trunk, the powerful, flexible appendage moving with surprising delicacy. The elephant let out a low, almost soothing rumble, a sound that vibrated through the air like a calming lullaby. The cub flinched but didn't flee. Instead, it watched as the elephant's trunk hovered over it, as if testing the air or seeking to understand this tiny creature that had become the center of its attention. After a moment of hesitation, the trunk gently brushed against the cub's side, a touch so soft it was almost imperceptible. The cub responded with a faint mew, a sound that seemed to carry both gratitude and uncertainty. It was a tentative gesture, a fragile bridge between two vastly different beings. The elephant rumbled again, this time with a note of reassurance, as though promising that no harm would come to the little one. Slowly, the cub began to relax, its trembling subsiding under the calming presence of its unlikely protector. The elephant, sensing that the cub was no longer paralyzed by fear, straightened up, its large ears flapping once as if to shake off the tension of the encounter. It surveyed the area with sharp, intelligent eyes, scanning the horizon for any lingering threats. Hyenas were known for their persistence, and the elephant was not about to let its guard down. Satisfied that the immediate danger had passed, the elephant turned its attention back to the cub. What followed was an incredible display of nurturing behavior, something rarely seen between species in the wild. The elephant began to gently nudge the cub with its trunk, encouraging it to stand. At first, the cub resisted, still wary of its surroundings and the massive creature looming over it. But the elephant's persistence paid off. With a small, unsteady wobble, the cub rose to its feet. Its legs were shaky, its tail flicking nervously, but it stood nonetheless. The elephant backed away slightly, giving the cub space. It was a gesture of trust, as if to say, "You're safe now, but you must move forward." The cub hesitated, glancing around as though expecting its pride to appear out of thin air. When no one came, it turned its gaze back to the elephant, its young mind grappling with the strangeness of the situation. But the cub's instincts told it to follow the one creature that had saved its life. And so, it took its first tentative steps toward the elephant. The savanna seemed to embrace the moment. The soft rustle of grass in the breeze and the distant chirping of birds formed a gentle backdrop as the cub trotted after the elephant. It was an odd sight. The tiny lion and the massive elephant moving together, their steps out of sync, but their direction united. The cub's natural curiosity began to surface as it followed its new guardian. Every so often it would stop to sniff the ground or bat at a blade of grass, but it always kept the elephant within view, as if tethered to the safety it represented. The elephant, for its part, seemed to take on the role of a watchful guardian. It adjusted its pace to match the cub's tiny strides, occasionally turning its head to check on the little one. When the cub strayed too far or became distracted, the elephant would let out a soft rumble, prompting the cub to scurry back. It was a dynamic that might have seemed comical if it weren't so profoundly touching. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting the savanna in hues of orange and gold, the pair approached a shallow watering hole. The elephant stopped at the edge, its trunk dipping into the cool water for a drink. The cub, unfamiliar with the routine, hesitated at first, but the sight of the elephant drinking seemed to spark something in its young mind. It padded cautiously to the water's edge, its reflection rippling in the surface, as it leaned forward to lap at the water. For the first time since its ordeal began, the cub felt a small sense of normalcy. The water was refreshing, a reminder that life still held small comforts, even in the face of danger. The elephant watched as the cub drank, its massive shadow enveloping the tiny creature like a protective canopy. It was a moment of quiet reprieve, a chance for both the savanna's smallest and largest to find solace in each other's company. But even as peace settled over the watering hole, the elephant remained vigilant. It knew the savanna was rarely safe for long, especially for a cub without a pride. Every sound, every movement in the grass was a potential threat. The elephant's ears twitched, its trunk occasionally lifting to sniff the air, ready to act at the first sign of danger. The cub, oblivious to the risks, seemed content to stay close to the giant that had become its shield against the wild. As the sun sank lower and the shadows grew longer, the elephant made a decision. It rumbled softly, signaling to the cub that it was time to move on. The cub tilted its head, as if trying to understand. But when the elephant began to walk away, the cub instinctively followed. Together, they disappeared into the twilight, their journey only just beginning. The bond between them, forged in a moment of peril, was growing stronger with each step, a bond that would soon be tested in ways neither could imagine. As the days passed, the unlikely pair continued their journey across the sprawling savanna. The lion cub, once trembling with fear and unsure of its place in the world, began to adapt to its new life alongside the elephant. The cub's instincts as a predator and the elephant's nature as a herbivore might have made them an odd match, but their bond grew stronger with every step. In their shared moments, a connection formed that seemed to transcend the boundaries of species, size, and instinct. Each morning, the elephant would awaken with the rising sun, shaking off the cool dew that clung to its massive frame. The cub, nestled safely in a patch of tall grass or under the shelter of the elephant's shadow, would stir moments later. The dawn was their signal to move, to find food and water, and to navigate the savanna's many challenges. Though the cub was far too young to hunt on its own, it eagerly followed the elephant, trusting the giant implicitly. The bond between them became evident in the smallest gestures. When the cub grew tired, the elephant would slow its pace, allowing the tiny creature to rest. Sometimes, the elephant would nudge the cub gently with its trunk, encouraging it to keep moving or guiding it toward shade when the midday sun became too intense. The cub, in turn, began to display its own kind of affection. It would paw playfully at the elephant's feet or nuzzle against its trunk, a sign of trust that warmed the heart of the gentle giant. One afternoon, while the pair traversed a particularly dry stretch of savanna, the cub stumbled upon a family of meerkats darting in and out of their burrows. Intrigued, the cub crouched low, its tail flicking with excitement as it watched the tiny creatures scurry about. The elephant paused, turning to observe the cub's antics with an almost parental patience. When the cub pounced at the meerkats in playful curiosity, they scattered, chittering angrily as they vanished into their underground tunnels. The cub, confused but unbothered, let out a small, questioning mew and trotted back to the elephant. The giant rumbled softly, as if in amusement, before continuing on its way. As their journey continued, the cub began to grow stronger and more confident. It mimicked the elephant's behaviors, learning to sniff the air for signs of danger and to listen closely to the sounds of the savanna. The cub even started to explore more boldly, though it never ventured far from the elephant's side. This newfound confidence was a testament to the bond they shared. Under the elephant's watchful gaze, the cub felt safe enough to discover the world. Their dynamic was not without its challenges, however. On one occasion, while the elephant was foraging near a grove of acacia trees, the cub wandered too far in its pursuit of a colorful butterfly. Distracted by the chase, the cub failed to notice a jackal creeping through the tall grass. The predator, small but opportunistic, saw the lone cub as an easy target and began to stalk closer. The cub's playful growls quickly turned into alarmed cries as it realized the jackal's intent. But before the predator could make its move, the ground shook with the force of the elephant's charge. Trumpeting loudly, the giant appeared like a thundercloud on the horizon, its massive form barreling towards the jackal. The predator hesitated, its survival instincts overriding its hunger, and it bolted before the elephant could reach it. The cub, visibly shaken, cowered as the elephant approached. But instead of scolding the little one, the elephant extended its trunk to comfort the cub, brushing gently against its fur. The cub responded by nuzzling the elephant, a silent promise to stay closer from then on. It was a lesson learned the hard way, but it only deepened the bond between them. Despite the challenges, there were moments of joy that underscored the beauty of their partnership. On one particularly hot day, the elephant led the cub to a watering hole shaded by a cluster of palm trees. After quenching its thirst, the elephant began to spray water with its trunk, dousing itself in an attempt to cool down. The cub, watching with wide eyes, soon joined in the fun. It leaped and pounced at the sprays of water, letting out tiny roars of delight as droplets sparkled in the sunlight. The sight of the cub's uninhibited joy brought an almost playful energy to the elephant, which continued to shower the cub until both were soaked and content. Over time, the cub and the elephant began to communicate in ways that were subtle but unmistakable. The elephant's low rumbles and gentle nudges conveyed guidance and reassurance, while the cub's mews and playful swats expressed its emotions. It was as though they had developed a language of their own, one born of necessity and nurtured by trust. In this bond, there was no hierarchy, no predator and prey, only two souls navigating the wild together. Other animals in the savanna began to take notice of this unusual pairing. A herd of zebras watched curiously as the elephant and the cub passed by, their heads tilting in disbelief. A group of baboons chattered excitedly from the treetops, pointing at the spectacle below. Even a solitary cheetah paused in its hunt to observe the pair, its sleek body tensed with confusion before it slinked away. The savannah was full of surprises, but none quite like this. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, the cub curled up beside the elephant to rest. The elephant stood guard, its large frame silhouetted against the fading light. It was a moment of peace, a rare reprieve from the constant demands of survival. The cub let out a contented sigh, its small body rising and falling with each breath, while the elephant rumbled softly, as if humming a lullaby. Their journey had only just begun, but the bond they shared had already weathered tests of trust and survival. Together they were rewriting the rules of the wild, proving that compassion and connection could exist even in the harshest of environments. As the stars emerged one by one in the vast African sky, the savannah bore witness to an extraordinary friendship that would continue to grow, one step at a time. The savannah at dusk was a place of both beauty and danger. The sky, painted in shades of orange and purple, stretched endlessly, its brilliance mirrored by the golden grasses swaying in the cooling breeze. For the elephant and the lion cub, it was another day nearing its end, their bond growing deeper with each shared experience. But the tranquility of the moment was deceptive. The savannah, ever unpredictable, was about to test their resilience in ways neither could foresee. The pair had just left a small watering hole where the elephant had stood sentinel while the cub played near the edge, chasing frogs and splashing in the shallows. Now, as the light began to fade, they made their way toward a grove of baobab trees that offered shade and relative safety. The elephant rumbled softly, its low, resonant sound a signal to the cub to stay close. The little lion, though growing bolder and stronger with each passing day, still relied on the elephant for protection. The first sign of trouble came subtly. The elephant's ears twitched, and its trunk lifted to test the air. The scent of the savannah was familiar, earthy, tinged with the sharpness of dry grass and the faint sweetness of distant blooms. But beneath it was something else, something acrid and unmistakable, a predator's musk. The elephant's posture changed instantly, its massive frame stiffening as it scanned the horizon. The cub, sensing the shift in its guardian's demeanor, paused mid-step, its tail flicking nervously. From the shadows of the tall grass, a leopard emerged. Sleek and powerful, the big cat moved with the fluid grace of a seasoned hunter. Its golden coat, dappled with dark rosettes, seemed to ripple in the fading light. This was no opportunistic scavenger like the jackal the cub had encountered before. This was a predator in its prime, and it was hungry. The leopard's amber eyes locked onto the cub, its focus unyielding as it calculated its next move. The elephant trumpeted, a sound that shattered the stillness and sent birds exploding into the sky. It was a warning, a declaration of dominance meant to intimidate the leopard. But the leopard was undeterred. Unlike the hyenas or jackal, it was not easily scared off, especially with prey so tempting and vulnerable in its sights. It crouched low, muscles coiling like springs, ready to pounce. The cub, though growing braver, was still a child of the savannah. It let out a small, uncertain growl, its tiny teeth bared in an attempt to mimic the fierce roar of an adult lion. The sound, while admirable in its intent, was far from intimidating. The leopard, unamused, took a slow, deliberate step forward, its gaze fixed on the cub. The elephant, seeing the imminent danger, stepped between the cub and the leopard. Its massive frame cast a long shadow over the cub, shielding it completely. With ears flared wide and trunk raised high, the elephant became an imposing wall of muscle and ivory. It trumpeted again, louder this time, the sound reverberating across the plains like a war cry. The ground seemed to tremble under its defiant stance. The leopard paused, its amber eyes narrowing as it assessed the situation. The elephant was an obstacle, and a formidable one at that, but leopards are nothing if not cunning, and this one was no exception. It began to circle, moving with the predatory precision of a creature that had learned to navigate the savanna's challenges through stealth and strategy. Its movements were almost hypnotic, its tail flicking lazily as it sought an opening. The cub, though scared, began to show signs of its own growing courage. It stayed close to the elephant, but its small body tensed as it let out another growl, this one louder and more insistent. The leopard's eyes flicked briefly toward the cub, and in that moment, something remarkable happened. The cub took a step forward, standing just a little taller, its tiny claws digging into the earth. It was as if the cub, inspired by the elephant's unwavering bravery, had found a spark of its own. The elephant rumbled softly, a sound that seemed almost encouraging. It took a small step back, not to retreat, but to give the cub space. The gesture was subtle, but its message was clear. You are not alone, but you must also stand for yourself. The cub, emboldened by this silent support, let out another growl and then another, its voice growing stronger with each sound. It was a far cry from the roar of an adult lion, but it was enough to make the leopard hesitate, its predatory confidence wavering for the briefest of moments. Seizing the opportunity, the elephant charged. Its massive legs thundered against the earth as it barreled towards the leopard, its tusks gleaming in the dim light. The leopard, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught, darted to the side, its agility saving it from the full force of the charge. But the message was clear. The cub was not an easy target, and any attempt to harm it would come at a great cost. The leopard, realizing it was outmatched, began to retreat. Its sleek body disappeared into the tall grass, its movements quick and silent as it vanished into the night. The elephant slowed its pace, its ears swiveling as it listened for any signs of the predator's return. Satisfied that the danger had passed, it turned back to the cub. The little lion stood frozen, its wide eyes reflecting both fear and awe. When the elephant approached, the cub nuzzled against its leg, a gesture of gratitude and relief. The elephant responded with a gentle nudge of its trunk, a silent reassurance that all was well. That night, as the stars glittered above them, the cub nestled close to the elephant, its small body pressing against the giant's side. The savanna, once again peaceful, seemed to cradle them in its vast embrace. The events of the evening had strengthened their bond, proving that even in the face of great danger, their connection was unbreakable. The cub, though still young, had taken its first steps toward bravery, and the elephant, ever the guardian, had shown the savanna that even its fiercest predators could be turned away by the power of compassion and courage. Together, they were more than just a pair of mismatched travelers. They were a testament to the strength found in unity, even in the wildest corners of the world. The days had turned into weeks, and the lion cub was no longer the helpless creature it had been when the elephant first found it. Under the watchful care of the gentle giant, the cub had grown stronger, its once spindly legs now sturdy, and its playful nature tempered by the harsh lessons of the savanna. The bond between the two had deepened into something that felt unshakable, a partnership forged through trust, shared trials, and an unspoken understanding. But nature, ever impartial, does not allow such alliances to last forever. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, the elephant and the cub rested in the shade of a cluster of thorny acacias. The cub stretched luxuriously, yawning to reveal a mouthful of sharp, pearly teeth. It had begun to display more and more of the behaviors typical of its kind, pouncing, stalking, and even practicing its tiny roars, which had grown less pitiful and more confident. The elephant, meanwhile, watched with a quiet pride, as if it understood that the cub was coming into its own. The peace of the moment was interrupted by a sound that made both creatures lift their heads, a distant roar, low and powerful, carried on the wind. The cub froze, its ears twitching as it listened intently. Another roar followed, closer this time, and then another. It was unmistakable. A pride of lions was nearby. The cub's reaction was immediate. Its tail flicked with excitement, and it let out a small, eager mew. For weeks, it had been without the comforting presence of its kind, and the sound of those roars, awakened a deep instinct within it. Without hesitation, the cub began to move toward the source of the sound, its small body cutting through the tall grass with surprising speed. The elephant rumbled softly, a sound that carried a mix of concern and resignation. It followed the cub, its long strides easily keeping pace, but it did not attempt to stop the little one. It seemed to understand that this was a moment that could not be delayed. The cub belonged with its own kind, and the elephant's role as its protector was nearing its end. As they approached the source of the roars, the landscape changed. The grass gave way to a rocky outcrop, its surface warmed by the morning sun. At the top of the outcrop, a lioness stood, her golden coat gleaming as she scanned the savanna. She roared again, her powerful voice echoing across the plains. Around her, several other lions lounged in the shade, their sleek bodies relaxed but alert. The cub hesitated, its tiny body crouched low as it surveyed the scene. It seemed torn between excitement and trepidation, unsure of how to approach the pride. The elephant, standing a short distance behind, rumbled softly, as if encouraging the cub to take the next step. Finally, the lioness spotted the cub. Her ears perked, and her amber eyes locked onto the tiny figure. She let out a low, questioning growl, and the other lions stirred, their attention shifting to the newcomer. The cub responded with a series of high-pitched mews, its tail flicking nervously as it took tentative steps toward the pride. The lioness rose gracefully and began to descend the rocky slope, her movements slow and deliberate. The cub paused, its small frame quivering as the larger predator approached. But the lioness did not bare her teeth or growl. Instead, she sniffed the cub, her large nose brushing against its fur. Recognition flickered in her eyes, and she let out a soft chuff, a sound of acceptance. The cub, reassured, pressed itself against the lioness, nuzzling her chest with a fervor born of weeks of loneliness. The lioness responded by licking the cub's head, her rough tongue smoothing its unruly fur. It was a reunion that needed no words, a moment of pure instinct and connection. The rest of the pride began to gather, their curiosity giving way to a quiet acknowledgement of the cub's return. The elephant stood at a distance, watching the scene unfold. It did not move closer, understanding that this was not its place. Its massive body seemed to sag slightly, as though burdened by the weight of the inevitable goodbye. The cub, caught up in the warmth of its family, seemed to momentarily forget its guardian. But then, as if remembering, it turned and looked back. The cub's amber eyes met the elephant's, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. The cub let out a soft mew, its way of expressing gratitude and farewell. The elephant responded with a low rumble, its trunk lifting briefly in acknowledgement. It was a bittersweet moment, a goodbye that carried the weight of all they had shared. The lioness, sensing the cub's hesitation, nudged it gently with her nose, guiding it back toward the pride. The cub obeyed, though it cast one last glance over its shoulder at the elephant. Then it disappeared into the cluster of lions, its small body swallowed by the warmth and safety of its family. The elephant remained still for a long moment, its gaze fixed on the spot where the cub had vanished. Finally, it turned away, its massive form moving slowly across the savanna. It did not trumpet or rumble, nor did it glance back. There was no need. Its role had been fulfilled, and it carried with it the quiet pride of having done what was right. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the savanna returned to its usual rhythm. The elephant, now alone, continued its journey, blending once more into the vastness of the wild. Somewhere in the distance, the cub played with its siblings, its heart full and its future secure. Though their paths had diverged, the bond they had shared left an indelible mark on both their lives. In the vast tapestry of the savanna, their story became a quiet testament to the power of compassion, resilience, and the connections that can arise in the most unexpected of places.